I ascend the ancient throne of the black men, even the firstborn themselves concurring in it. But I would have none of it. My heart could never be with the race that had heaped indignities upon my princess and my son. At my suggestion, Sodar became Jeddak of the firstborn. He had been a dator, or prince, until Isis had degraded him, so that his fitness for the high office bestowed was unquestioned. The peace of the Valley Door thus assured, the green warriors dispersed to their desolate sea bottoms, while we of Helium returned to our own country. Here again was a throne offered me, since no word had been received from the missing Jeddak of Helium, Tardos Mors, grandfather of Dejah Thoris, or his son, Mors Kajak, Jed of Helium, her father. Over a year had elapsed since they had set out to explore the northern hemisphere in search of Carthoris, and at last their disheartened people had accepted as truth the vague rumors of their death that had filtered in from the frozen region of the pole. Once again I refused a throne, for I would not believe that the mighty Tardos Mors, or his no less redoubtable son, was dead. "Let one of their own blood rule you until they return," I said to the assembled nobles of Helium, as I addressed them from the pedestal of truth beside the throne of righteousness and the temple of reward, from the very spot where I had stood a year before when Zat Auras pronounced the sentence of death upon me. As I spoke, I stepped forward and laid my hand upon the shoulder of Carthoris, where he stood in the front rank of the circle of nobles about me. As one, the nobles and the people lifted their voices in a long cheer of approbation. 10,000 swords sprang on high from as many scabbards, and the glorious fighting men of ancient Helium held Carthoris, Jeddak of Helium. His tenure of office was to be for life, or until his great-grandfather or grandfather should return. Having thus satisfactorily arranged this important duty for Helium, I started the following day for the Valley Door, that I might remain close to the Temple of the Sun until the fateful day that should see the opening of the prison cell where my lost love lay buried. Horvastus and Kantos Khan, with my other noble lieutenants, I left with Carthoris at Helium, that he might have the benefit of their wisdom, bravery, and loyalty in the performance of the arduous duties which had devolved upon him. Only Wola, my Martian hound, accompanied me. At my heels tonight, the faithful beast moved softly in my tracks. As large as a Shetland pony, with hideous head and frightful fangs, he was indeed an awesome spectacle as he crept after me on his 10 short muscular legs, but to me he was the embodiment of love and loyalty. The figure ahead was that of the black dator of the firstborn, Thurid, whose undying enmity I had earned that time I laid him low with my bare hands in the courtyard of the temple of Isis, and bound him with his own harness before the noble men and women who had but a moment before been extolling his prowess. Like many of his fellows, he had apparently accepted the new order of things with good grace, and had sworn fealty to Sodar, his new ruler, but I knew that he hated me, and I was sure that in his heart he envied and hated Sodar, so I had kept a watch upon his comings and goings, to the end that of late I had become convinced that he was occupied with some manner of intrigue. Several times I had observed him leaving the walled city of the firstborn after dark, taking his way out into the cruel and horrible Valley Door, where no honest business could lead any man. Tonight he moved quickly along the edge of the forest until well beyond sight or sound of the city. Then he turned across the crimson sward toward the shore of the lost sea of Chorus. The rays of the nearer moon, swinging low across the valley, touched his jewel-encrusted harness with 1,000 changing lights, and glanced from the glossy ebony of his smooth hide. Twice he turned his head back toward the forest, after the manner of one who was upon an evil errand, though he must have felt quite safe from pursuit. I did not dare follow him there beneath the moonlight, since it best suited my plans not to interrupt his. I wished him to reach his destination unsuspecting, that I might learn just where that destination lay, and the business that awaited the night prowler there. So it was that I remained hidden until after Third had disappeared over the edge of the steep bank beside the sea a quarter of a mile away. Then, with Woola following, I hastened across the open after the black Dator. The quiet of the tomb lay upon the mysterious valley of death, crouching deep in its warm nest within the sunken area at the south pole of the dying planet. In the far distance the golden cliffs raised their mighty barrier faces far into the starlit heavens, the precious metals and scintillating jewels that composed them sparkling in the brilliant light of Mars's two gorgeous moons. At my back was the forest, pruned and trimmed like the sword to park-like symmetry by the browsing of the ghoulish plant men. Before me lay the lost sea of Chorus, while farther on I caught the shimmering ribbon of Is, the river of mystery, where it wound out from beneath the golden cliffs to empty into Chorus, to which for countless ages had been borne the deluded and unhappy Martians of the outer world upon the voluntary pilgrimage to this false heaven. The plant men, with their blood-sucking hands, and the monstrous white apes that make Dor hideous by day, were hidden in their lairs for the night. There was no longer a holy Thurn upon the balcony in the golden cliffs above the Is to summon them with weird cry to the victims floating down to their maws upon the cold, broad bosom of ancient Is. The navies of Helium and the Firstborn had cleared the fortresses and the temples of the Thurns when they had refused to surrender and accept the new order of things that had swept their false religion from long-suffering Mars. In a few isolated countries, they still retained their age-old power, but Ma Tai Shan, their Hecador, father of Thurns, had been driven from his temple. Strenuous had been our endeavors to capture him, but with a few of the faithful he had escaped and was in hiding, where we knew not. As I came cautiously to the edge of the low cliff overlooking the lost sea of Chorus, I saw Third pushing out upon the bosom of the shimmering water in a small skiff, one of those strangely wrought craft of unthinkable age which the holy Thurns, with their organization of priests and lesser Thurns, were wont to distribute along the banks of the Is, that the long journey of their victims might be facilitated. Drawn up on the beach below me were a score of similar boats, each with its long pole, at one end of which was a pike, at the other a paddle. Third was hugging the shore, and as he passed out of sight round a nearby promontory, I shoved one of the boats into the water, and calling Woola into it, pushed out from shore. The pursuit of Third carried me along the edge of the sea toward the mouth of the Is. The farther moon lay close to the horizon, casting a dense shadow beneath the cliffs that fringed the water. Thuria, the nearer moon, had set, nor would it rise again for nearly 4 hours, so that I was ensured concealing darkness for the length of time at least. On and on went the black warrior. Now he was opposite the mouth of the Is. Without an instant's hesitation, he turned up the grim river, paddling hard against the strong current. After him came Woola and I, closer now, for the man was too intent upon forcing his craft up the river to have any eyes for what might be transpiring behind him. He hugged the shore where the current was less strong. Presently he came to the dark, cavernous portal in the face of the golden cliffs, through which the river poured. On into the Stygian darkness beyond he urged his craft. It seemed hopeless to attempt to follow him here, where I could not see my hand before my face, and I was almost on the point of giving up the pursuit and drifting back to the mouth of the river, there to await his return, when a sudden bend showed a faint luminosity ahead. My quarry was plainly visible again, and in the increasing light from the phosphorescent rock that lay embedded in great patches in the roughly arched roof of the cavern, I had no difficulty in following him. It was my first trip upon the bosom of Is, and the things I saw there will live forever in my memory. Terrible as they were, they could not have commenced to approximate the horrible conditions which must have obtained before Tarkus, the great green warrior, Sodar, the black Dator, and I brought the light of truth to the outer world and stopped the mad rush of millions upon the voluntary pilgrimage to what they believed would end in a beautiful valley of peace and happiness and love. Even now the low islands which dotted the broad stream were choked with the skeletons and half-devoured carcasses of those who, through fear or a sudden awakening to the truth, had halted almost at the completion of their journey. In the awful stench of these frightful charnel isles, haggard maniacs screamed and gibbered and fought among the torn remnants of their grisly feast, while on those which contained but clean-picked bones they battled with one another, the weaker furnishing sustenance for the stronger, or with claw-like hands clutched at the bloated bodies that drifted down with the current. Third paid not the slightest attention to the screaming things that either menaced or pleaded with him as the mood directed them. Evidently he was familiar with the horrid sights that surrounded him. He continued up the river for perhaps a mile, and then, crossing over to the left bank, drew his craft up on a low ledge that lay almost on a level with the water. I dared not follow across the stream, for he most surely would have seen me. Instead, I stopped close to the opposite wall beneath an overhanging mass of rock that cast a dense shadow beneath it. Here I could watch Third without danger of discovery. The black was standing upon the ledge beside his boat, looking up the river as though he were awaiting one whom he expected from that direction. As I lay there beneath the dark rocks, I noticed that a strong current seemed to flow directly toward the center of the river, so that it was difficult to hold my craft in its position. I edged farther into the shadow that I might find a hold upon the bank, but, though I proceeded several yards, I touched nothing, and then, finding that I would soon reach a point from where I could no longer see the black man, I was compelled to remain where I was, holding my position as best I could by paddling strongly against the current which flowed from beneath the rocky mass behind me. I could not imagine what might cause this strong lateral flow, for the main channel of the river was plainly visible to me from where I sat, and I could see the rippling junction of it and the mysterious current which had aroused my curiosity. While I was still speculating upon the phenomenon, my attention was suddenly riveted upon Third, who had raised both palms forward above his head in the universal salute of Martians, and a moment later his kaor, the Barsoomian word of greeting, came in low but distinct tones. I turned my eyes up the river in the direction that his were bent, and presently there came within my limited range of vision a longboat, in which were 6 men. 5 were at the paddles, while the 6th sat in the seat of honor. The white skins, the flowing yellow wigs which covered their bald pates, and the gorgeous diadems set in circlets of gold about their heads, marked them as holy Therns. As they drew up beside the ledge upon which Third awaited them, he in the bow of the boat arose to step ashore, and then I saw that it was none other than Matai Shang, father of Therns. The evident cordiality with which the 2 men exchanged greetings filled me with wonder, for the black and white men of Barsoom were hereditary enemies, nor ever before had I known of 2 meeting other than in battle. Evidently, the reverses that had recently overtaken both peoples had resulted in an alliance between these 2 individuals, at least against the common enemy, and now I saw why Third had come so often out of the valley door by night, and that the nature of his conspiring might be such as to strike very close to me or to my friends. I wish that I might have found a point closer to the 2 men from which to have heard their conversation, but it was out of the question now to attempt to cross the river, and so I lay quietly watching them, who would have given so much to have known how close I lay to them, and how easily they might have overcome and killed me with their superior force. Several times Third pointed across the river in my direction, but that his gestures had any reference to me, I did not for a moment believe. Presently he and Matai Shang entered the latter's boat, which turned out into the river, and swinging round, forged steadily across in my direction. As they advanced, I moved my boat farther and farther in beneath the overhanging wall, but at last it became evident that their craft was holding the same course. The 5 paddlers sent the larger boat ahead at a speed that taxed my energies to equal. Every instant I expected to feel my prow crash against solid rock. The light from the river was no longer